Hey everyone, it's your average chess player here. Today we're gonna look at this endgame position. It is white's turn to play and we have to try and find the winning continuation for white. So go ahead, pause the video and try to find the best move for white here. As usual, I leave the timestamps in the description. So if you wanna just look at the solution or you wanna verify your calculation, skip ahead and see that part of the video. So yeah, pause the video if you want to try and find the solution for yourself. I'm going to show you how I approached this and how I solved this position and mistakes that I did along the way and what I learned from that. So in this position and in today's video, we are not going to try to brute force this position. We're just going to try and see what are the threats that black poses and try to see how we can solve that with just calculating limited variations and not really trying to go through a process of elimination. So if it was black's turn to play, or if you want to ask what is black's plan in this position, black would want to try to play king f4, king f3, and even like just take this pawn. If black gets access, since we have light squared bishop, if black gets access to the f3 square, this pawn is gone because neither of our pieces are close enough to protect it. And if you play like black gets king f4 and king f3, this is gone, right? And once black takes this pawn, black would want to play something like g3, g2, and queens, in which case we would have to give up the bishop on the g2 square, and this game would be a draw. So as white, we would want to try and win this. So with that, having said that, taking control of this f3 square seems to be something important, and we need to see how we can do that. So just having said that, what is the first move that comes to your mind? The first move that came to my mind was bishop to d5. This just felt intuitive. I'm still having the bishop in a central position and I'm controlling this f3 square. This should be a move to consider. So after bishop d5, I saw g3. And after f3, I realized like, hey, if you play g2, I have f4 check, a discover attack on the pawn, but a check here. So after this is a draw. But in this position, instead of g2, black can play king f4, preventing this pawn push and enabling the black pawn to go to g2. And now this bishop no longer has access to the g2 square. So this is an important detail that we have to remember from this variation. So black is winning in this position because there's nothing much we can do. After g2 is just queens. So let's go back. So bishop d5 did not work, although we took control of f3. But from this variation that we just saw, it is important that we take control of the g2 square as well, or at least have access to g2. So we need to have access to f3 and g2, and we need to find a move that would help us solve for both of those problems. So yeah, if you want to pause the video here, go ahead and do that and try to find the first move in the continuation. The move that we had to find after I saw bishop d5 and realized this, I knew that the move that I had to play here was bishop to f1. And the idea is to play bishop g2 next, so keeping control over g2 and getting control of this diagonal, but mainly controlling f3 after that. And with the bishop on g2, the pawn cannot be pushed further. So that also like serves as a purpose, but now we have control over a lot of squares. So if now black plays something like king f4, after bishop g2, we now control all the squares in front of the pawn and the black king cannot come forward. So now g3, f3, and king e3. So black wants to kind of put his king on f2 and try to scare away the bishop and queen as own pawn. So that is what black is going to do. This pawn is really advanced when compared to this. So if we lose this bishop for nothing, this pawn is going to queen first. And our pawn is never going to see the f8 square, so as to speak. So this is a kind of the second critical position in the study. So pause the video if you want to and try to find the winning move for white here. The way that I came up with the correct move here was to just put in a token move and see what happens after king f2. Like I said, king f2 is the main threat here. So if king comes to f2, we cannot play bishop h3 because of king takes f3. And if you play bishop h1, black can play king g1 and attack this bishop further. And we don't really have squares. So if I play f4, threatening to push the pawn, but also trying to free this bishop up, black can simply capture in this position. But if I did have this position, same position, with white to move, then this is winning, because I'll play something like bishop d5, bishop c6, take my bishop out of harm's way and start pushing this pawn. And whenever black puts his pawn on g2 and is going to queen, I can just sacrifice my bishop for this pawn. So like I said, this variation is doomed. Black will queen first and then this pawn is gone. Let's go back here. So here, instead of king c4, that was just a token move just to see what happens. So once you see that your bishop has to land on h1 with the pawn on f4, we can then try out bishop h1 first. Again, bishop h3 is not even a move to consider because of king f3. So if bishop h1 first, if king f2, I can play f4. And with king g1, we reach the same position, but it's white's turn to play. And we play something like bishop d5. And we successfully release the bishop from its prison. And no matter what black plays now, g2, like we can ignore, we don't have to take immediately because the king is blocking the pawn. After king f2, takes, and then we just queen our pawn and we checkmate the black king from here. We reach an elementary queen and king endgame. So that is the critical variation in this position. There's also one more which I just wanted to show, which was after bishop f1, king f4, bishop g2. Black is not forced to play g3. Black can also play something like king e5. And this is like a slightly simpler like a simpler set of moves in this variation, where you just kind of toy around with the black king and keep them opposition and eventually drive the black king away from this pawn and capture this pawn and then push our own pawn and queen it. So the way this works is because our bishop controls the e4 square and even the d5 square, and because of that, black never can really do any triangulation and try to get the opposition. So king f4, king d4, king f5, king e3. Now if king e5 from here, you play bishop e4 and you take away all the squares, separate the king from the pawn. After king d6, you do that, and then you just take this pawn and start queening. And in this position, if king g5, then you just kind of take away squares for the black king and kind of force the king onto some unfavorable square with some zugzwang. Here g3 is the only move. After g3, f4, king g4 and f5, this pawn is going to queen, and this king is nicely cut off from the g2 pawn, and we can just queen this pawn. I don't even have to take this pawn. I can just queen and give a check, and then just checkmate on g2. That's the endgame. It's a nice simple endgame. Once you know what black's plans are, you can just you can immediately bring your focus into just a few moves and start solving for it. Okay, if you skipped ahead to this part of the video for the solution, here is the solution. The first move that we had to find was bishop to f1, taking control of g2, and then next play bishop g2 to control f3 so that the black king cannot reach the pawn on f2. So after bishop f1, king f4, bishop g2, we prevent the black king from coming further. The critical variation that we saw in the video happened after g3, f3, and king e3. Here you had to find the only winning move for white, which was to play bishop h1. And after bishop h1, king f2, f4, releasing the bishop from its prison. Now, when black plays king g1, we can simply play bishop d5 and release the bishop from this prison. And now we can start queening this pawn. After you just sacrifice the bishop once the black pawn is going to queen, and then we just queen your own pawn, and it's just a checkmate. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like on the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. I make lots of videos on endgames, so go check out those videos. Catch you guys in the next one.